There comes a point in your life when the noise around you gets so loud, it drowns out the voice within you. And sis, I came to tell you today, it's okay to get quiet. It's okay to go still. It's okay to disappear for a moment if it means you're finally about to meet the version of you that doesn't settle for less. See, we live in a world that praises the loudest one in the room, but I've learned sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay silent and focus on yourself. Because healing, that don't happen in the spotlight. Growth, that don't come with applause. Breakthrough, that happens behind closed doors when nobody's watching. So today, I'm not here to tell you to prove yourself. I'm here to remind you, protect your peace, preserve your energy, and prioritize your purpose. Because the real glow up is quiet. Silence is not weakness, it's strategy. In a world that thrives on noise, opinions, and instant reactions, choosing silence can be mistaken for passivity or fear. But silence, when intentional, is a powerful move. It's not about retreating, it's about recalibrating. There are seasons in life where your next breakthrough won't come from speaking up, it will come from quieting down. When you go silent, you create space to hear God more clearly, space to feel your own heart beat again, space to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. So often we are conditioned to react, to explain ourselves, to defend every decision, to clap back when misunderstood. But every time you give your energy to noise, you're feeding what was meant to fade. Silence says, I'm not here to convince you, I'm here to align with something greater. There's power in refusing to engage with things that no longer serve your spirit. There's a divine kind of discipline in keeping your mouth closed when your flesh wants to speak. That's not weakness, that's warfare, that's strategy. When you stay silent, you're not disconnected, you're discerning. You're choosing to observe before you act. You're letting wisdom speak louder than emotion. Jesus didn't respond to every accusation. He didn't justify himself in every storm. Sometimes he said nothing because he understood that silence could carry more authority than words. That same spirit is in you. You don't have to prove yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your silence can speak louder than their noise ever could. People will question your silence. They'll be uncomfortable with your stillness. They'll try to bait you into reacting just to pull you back into old versions of yourself. But silence is how you protect the new version of you that's still being formed. It's how you guard the sacred space of transformation. When you're building something real, be it your healing, your business, your purpose, you can't afford to explain every brick you lay. Some of your most strategic moves will be made in the dark, away from the crowd, while the world assumes you've gone quiet for good. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them think you've fallen off. They don't see the blueprint you're carrying in your silence. They don't see the prayers you're whispering in the midnight hour. They don't know the seeds being planted beneath the surface. What looks like inactivity is actually divine preparation. What feels like a pause is often God's setup for something that eyes haven't seen and ears. Healing begins when distractions end. So many of us are walking around with broken hearts, fragmented minds, and wounded spirits, not because we don't want to heal, but because we're too distracted to begin. We've become so addicted to staying busy, staying connected, staying entertained, that we don't even realize we're running from the very thing that could set us free. Distractions are the enemy's way of keeping you occupied with surface level fixes so you never dig deep enough to confront the root of your pain. And healing doesn't happen on the surface. It happens when you get still enough to face what you've been avoiding. Every scroll, every notification, every conversation that drains your soul but fills your timeline, it all becomes noise that clouds your spirit. And as long as you're distracted, you're disconnected from the inner work that's calling your name. Distractions are comfortable. They give you something to focus on so you don't have to sit with your own reflection. But healing requires attention. It requires space. It requires presence. You can't heal what you're not willing to acknowledge. You can't grow past what you refuse to look at. And you'll never become whole in a place that only nurtures your numbness. There's a reason God often leads people into the wilderness before elevating them. The wilderness is where distractions die. It's where all the noise is stripped away and you're left with nothing but your truth. And that can feel scary, but it's also sacred, because when you finally get quiet, you start to hear your soul speak. You begin to notice the places that still hurt, the fears you've buried, the insecurities you've masked with performance. And in that raw space, healing becomes possible. Not instant, not easy, but possible. Distractions don't always come looking like chaos. Sometimes they come dressed as good things, things that look like opportunities, relationships that feel familiar, work that makes you feel validated. But anything that pulls you away from your healing, no matter how good it looks, is still a distraction. You've got to be willing to choose your future over your comfort, to turn down the volume of the world so you can hear the whisper of your purpose. Healing can't compete with constant noise. It won't fight for your attention. It waits in the silence, in the slow moments, in the spaces where you finally stop running. There is a version of you that exists on the other side of stillness, a version of you that's no longer reacting out of pain, no longer settling because of fear, no longer pleasing people just to feel accepted. But you'll never meet that version if you're too distracted to dig deep. Healing starts when you choose to be present with yourself, no matter how uncomfortable that may be. It begins the moment you stop numbing, stop performing, stop pretending, and start listening to what your soul's been trying to say all along. Everyone doesn't deserve access to your becoming. One of the hardest truths to accept is that not everyone who started with you can stay with you. As you grow, evolve, and step into who God has called you to be, there will be people who can't handle your transformation. Some will question it, some will resent it, and some will try to keep you tied to the version of yourself they're most comfortable with. But becoming requires boundaries. It demands discernment. It calls you to protect your process, because what's being formed in you is sacred. You're not just changing, you're birthing something. And just like with any birth, you don't let just anybody into the delivery room. Some people only knew you in your brokenness, and they built their connection to you on that version. They were comfortable with your insecurity, your silence, your shrinking. But now that you're finding your voice, now that you're setting standards, now that you're refusing to settle, suddenly you're too much, suddenly you're acting different, but that's exactly the point. You are different. And becoming that version of yourself means some people will no longer have a seat at the table, not because you stopped loving them, but because you started loving yourself enough to stop shrinking to make them feel secure. We often carry guilt for outgrowing people, especially those who were there in our lowest moments. But survival together does not always mean we're meant to thrive together. Just because someone walked with you through pain doesn't mean they are equipped to walk with you through purpose. Some people were assigned to your past, not your future, and trying to drag them into your becoming will only slow you down, confuse your direction, and drain your energy. It's not personal, it's prophetic. God will begin to shift your circle when He's elevating your identity. He's not isolating you to punish you. He's positioning you to protect what He's planting. There are parts of your purpose that require quiet, private development. You can't explain every move. You don't need to justify every decision. Everyone isn't meant to have access to this version of you while it's still being formed. Some people will misunderstand your silence, misinterpret your focus, and mislabel your intentions. But your job is not to manage their perception. Your job is to steward your becoming. This season demands that you stop giving VIP access to people who treat your growth like a threat. You can love people from a distance. You can forgive without reconnecting. You can honor the past without dragging it into your future. The more you evolve, the more you'll realize how costly it is to stay connected to what no longer aligns. And the deeper you go in your becoming, the more clarity you'll gain about who's really for you and who is only for you. You are not obligated to make your growth comfortable for anyone else. Growth requires isolation before elevation. Before God lifts you, he often separates you, not because he wants to punish you, but because he wants to prepare you. Real growth doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in the quiet, in the hidden, in the uncomfortable spaces where you're forced to confront yourself without the comfort of distractions or applause. Isolation is the sacred space where clarity is born, where character is shaped, where foundation is built. And even though it feels lonely, it's one of the most intentional and powerful seasons you'll ever experience. When God is doing something new in you, he removes the noise so you can finally hear his voice. You start to realize that the people, patterns, and places that once felt like home no longer fit where you're headed. And at first, that detachment feels like a loss. You may grieve the version of yourself that used to settle just to belong, that used to keep the peace at the expense of your own, but the pain of separation is proof that elevation is near. God never prunes what he doesn't plan to grow, and before he multiplies you, he has to make sure you're rooted. In isolation, you begin to see the truth, not just about others, but about yourself. The masks come off, the distractions fall away. You start hearing the thoughts you've been drowning out with busyness. You face the fears you've been hiding behind performance, and it's there in that sacred stillness that God begins to show you who you really are. Not who you've been pretending to be, not who others expected you to be, but who you were created to be. Isolation isn't about being alone, it's about being aligned. You cannot elevate while still clinging to what's beneath you. That's why isolation comes first, because there are some weights you can't carry where you're going. There are some people who can't go with you because their presence is tied to your past. God separates before he reveals. He removes what you thought you needed so you can recognize that he's all you truly need. In the hidden place, your vision sharpens, your faith deepens, your identity strengthens, and you begin to stand in a confidence that doesn't need validation to feel secure. Elevation doesn't come from being seen, it comes from being ready. And isolation is what makes you ready. It teaches you how to hear God without a microphone, how to love yourself without an audience, how to trust the process when no one is clapping. It's the gym of your spirit, the cocoon of your purpose. And though the world may think you've gone quiet or lost your way, what's really happening is that you're being refined. You're shedding layers that no longer serve your destiny. You're building a foundation that won't crumble when you rise. Focus is the weapon that unlocks destiny. In a world constantly trying to pull your attention in every direction, the ability to focus has become rare and powerful. Focus isn't just about productivity or getting things done. It's about spiritual alignment. It's about choosing to zero in on what God has placed in your heart while everything around you tries to distract you, delay you, or discourage you. Focus is how you wage war against confusion. It's how you silence the noise of comparison, insecurity, and doubt. When your eyes are fixed on purpose, you stop giving energy to things that aren't part of your assignment. Distraction is the enemy's favorite tool, because it doesn't always show up loud and obvious. Sometimes it's disguised as good opportunities that don't carry God's anointing. Sometimes it's masked in relationships that feel familiar but keep you stagnant. Sometimes it's the constant need for validation that pulls you away from the inner work you were meant to be doing. That's why focus is more than discipline, it's discernment. It's the ability to say no to what's good so you can say yes to what's God. Your destiny doesn't need your attention to be divided, it needs your attention to be rooted. Focus sharpens your vision. It teaches you how to protect your time, how to steward your gifts, and how to move with intentionality. When you're truly focused, you start to operate differently. You speak with clarity. You move with purpose. You stop entertaining chaos just because it's loud. You begin to value your peace more than your popularity. And the more you focus, the more you realize how much of your potential was being wasted on things that didn't even matter. Conversations that led nowhere, commitments that drained you, habits that dulled your fire. But when you reclaim your focus, you start walking in power. You can't afford to be distracted when destiny is calling. There's something God placed in you that requires your full attention, not your half afford, not your leftover energy, but your full undivided focus. And when you give it that, things begin to shift. Doors open that used to be locked. Ideas flow that used to feel stuck. Confidence rises that used to be buried. Focus activates the supernatural. It turns small steps into divine strategy. It turns quiet seasons into preparation grounds. It turns your yes into momentum. Focus also exposes what's not aligned. The more you zero in on purpose, the more obvious the distractions become. What used to entice you now annoys you. What used to pull you in now pushes you away. That's growth. That's clarity. That's the power of a mind that's no longer being tossed by every opinion or trend. You're not here to follow every wave. You're here to build something solid. And building takes focus. It takes the kind of tunnel vision that's willing to miss out on what's popular to tap into what's eternal.